Everyone, everybody here okay? I want to welcome you to the Dunwoody Town Hall meeting and take a moment to introduce myself, and then I'm going to introduce the VIPs up here. My name is Bucky Johnson. I'm the mayor of Norcross, been the mayor of Norcross for 6 years, and they asked me to come be the moderator for tonight. I was flattered to be here. I have a fond memories for DeKalb County. I was graduated from Southwest DeKalb High School back in the day. I won't tell you what year that was, but and then taught at both Druid Hills High School and Shamrock High School, which is now Druid Hills Middle School. And kids went to school here in DeKalb County. And I remember when they built Dunwoody High School, they did not build this beautiful auditorium at that time. This is a fantastic facility, and I want to thank the principal for Dunwoody High School, which is Noel Malouf, and his staff. So fantastic that they let you use this for a community event, and I'm sure they have some great productions, and I understand they do some training for different AV training here in this facility, so that's awesome. Let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to do tonight and the format, but a little bit about you're a relatively new city. And Norcross was 1870, so we've been around a year or two. In cities, sometimes people understand city governments, sometimes they don't, so let me just give a kind of a brief overview. The mayor and council are the ones that really set the policy for the city. They make the rules and regulations and set the direction. And then the city managers of the cities, if they're a city manager form of government, which Dunwoody is and Norcross is, many of the cities in the state are city manager form of government, then the city manager is the professional, basically the professional that runs the city, the day-to-day hires and fires, and basically follows the lead of the mayor and council. So if you have questions about a policy issue, that probably would be best addressed to your mayor. If you have something about the day-to-day activities of the city, you might want to address that to your city manager. And we want a robust conversation tonight, and we want to be sure that you get a lot of good information about what's going on. One thing that mayors and councils and city managers are not very good at, we're good at a few things, but one thing we're not good at is mind reading. And so unless you tell us what your concerns are, and unless we hear from the community, we kind of do some things in a void or a vacuum. So that's why these meetings are so important, to hear from the community and hear also from your elected officials and from your city manager about the directions that the city is going into. There's a lot of discussion about new cities in DeKalb County. We've just had a new city form in Gwinnett County, which is Peachtree Corners. It's the largest city in Gwinnett County at 37 to 38,000. The city of Norcross is 15,000, and we've got actually 16 cities that we're dealing with in Gwinnett County, and we have to deal with Gwinnett County government and state government and federal government and so forth. So it's a very unique form of government. It's the government that's the closest to the people, and it's nice to be able to know who your elected officials are and who your folks that are running the city are. And it's great to have the police chief here tonight as well. So I hope it's going to be a great event. Let me introduce the stars of the show. Mike Davis, I've gotten to know him very well in the last couple of years. I'm actually the current president of the Metro Atlanta Mayors Association, or we like to call it MAMA. And Mike has been very active in that. I see him at a lot of different events and classes and conferences, and he is really representing you well to the rest of the area, both in the county and in the region and in the state. So you can be very proud of the work that Mike's doing. He's been mayor here for 2 years, and I'm going to let him introduce some VIPs here in a moment. But the other one on stage is Warren Hutmacher. When I first was elected mayor, I've never been an elected official. I was actually, after teaching at high school, I was the band director at Georgia Tech for 20 years. And so I got into politics relatively late in life. And so when I was elected mayor, Warren was our city manager, and we had just gone to city manager form of government. So he was able to train me up pretty quickly, and Mike said it took him a little longer to train Mike, but he was very, very helpful in letting me know what the rules and regulations were, giving me, great advice, and he was a good person to talk through the issues. And at the end of the day, he understands that the vote of the council and the mayor is his marching orders, and that was the way it was in Norcross, and that's the way it's here in Dunwoody. But let me tell you what, you have a first-class mayor and a first-class city manager, and you should be very, very proud of that. And you're going to get a chance to hear from them. And I know Mike wants to introduce some VIPs right now, so Mike.
Thanks, Bucky. I appreciate it. Is my mic working? Can you hear me? Yep. Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, we have a few of our city council members here. We have a few that weren't able to make it for various reasons. There's actually a meeting going on tonight that Lynn Deutsch had to be at concerning the tearing down of the school over on Chambly Dunwoody near the new Renaissance project. She'll be here later. But Doug Thompson, one of our city councilmen, is here. Terry Knoll is here.
Jim Reiteicher is here too.
And Jim Reiteicher. I saw you walk by somewhere, Jim. There you are. And then Denny Shortle's out of town today. He regretted missing this. And same thing with John Hennigan is actually out of town on business. So they both regretted not being here. But as you may expect, this, like all of our meetings, or all of at least our city council meetings, is being videotaped. So if you don't get enough, you can watch it again. So don't feel the need to take notes, because you have plenty of chance to watch this plenty of times. Trust me. So anyhow, I wanted to thank you all for coming. Did I miss any other elected officials? I know we were trying to get Nancy Jester, who was, and Jim Radovian is actually here too. He was a school board member, and Nancy Jester is a former school board member here too, that she was supposed to come. But anyhow, let me welcome you all for coming, and just thanks for joining us. I hope this meeting is informative for everyone, including us, including the whole city council and the staff. We really want to make sure that everyone has a chance to learn what's going on, and just really dig into some issues here. As you see, there's a big long list up here, and we're going to try to pick the ones that you have decided are the most important to talk about. And we probably won't get to all of them, because we're only going to be here till 9 o'clock. So why did we decide to have a town hall meeting? It really came up during our charter rewrite session that came up this summer. Somebody suggested that we actually put a town hall requirement into our charter, and those of us on city council were starting to kick that around. So that's not the kind of thing that belongs in your city charter, but it was a great idea. So I immediately raised my hand and said, let's just go ahead and do that. We don't have to put it in our charter. We'll just go ahead and start doing it. So we're going to have this one tonight, which, as you can see, is the format that you see, and I'll explain a little bit more on the format. But we're going to have 3 more during the year, and hopefully we'll, if you like it, and if the last one only one person shows up, we may stop. But if we can get a good crowd like this to come to all 4, the format will be: I'm going to talk with Warren tonight at our kickoff meeting. Then we're going to have, as you know, we have 3 different districts in Dunwoody. District 1 represented by Denny Shortle and Terry Knoll. District 2 represented by Jim Reiteicher and Lynn Deutsch, and District 3 represented by Doug Thompson and John Hennigan. Each one of those districts will have their own meeting in their own district that will be chaired, the way I'm chairing this one, by the 2 council people who represent that district. So that's how we're going to do this going forward. So we'll be able to delve a little bit more into details on the district information at the next meetings. So let me talk for a little bit about what it is that makes Dunwoody so unique and so so great in my mind. And and I talk at a lot of meetings, and I kind of give these 4 items right off the top of my head. You know, we are the retail hub of the Southeast, right here at the Perimeter Mall with all of our restaurants. We're the medical nexus of the Southeast with the hospitals right across the highway. Largest office market in Atlanta, and one of the most desirable neighborhoods for executives. So with that, we've attracted companies like State Farm, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, and if you guys have questions about economic development, if that came up as one of the items, we'll be kicking that around a little bit. But attracting a company like State Farm, which they just made their announcement this week, it's not just a big thing for Dunwoody. It's 2.2 million square feet of office space they're going to build and hire 10,000 employees in the Atlanta metro area. And the building is going to be actually connected to the MARTA station. And what they're thinking is that they want most of their employees to come to Dunwoody on MARTA. And so we're excited about that. So I think with all the stuff that Dunwoody has to offer, I can safely say that most every city in the country would love to have the advantages we have with all the things I just mentioned. You know, we have the lowest taxes in DeKalb and in Fulton County. So why did I run for mayor, and how do I find myself up here? I wake up sometimes asking myself that question. You know, what really got me going was the bond referendum 2.5 years ago. We were a $22 million a year city total revenue, and the city council was talking about raising $66 million to do a lot of park infrastructure work. And I thought that was kind of over the top. I thought that was dangerous, especially with what we see going on in the federal government and a lot of the cities and even states in this country that have really found themselves pretty seriously underwater. And I thought, you know, we shouldn't have to borrow money. So that really was what got me into this whole thing, this whole politics thing. You know, for me, it was really the right time of my life. I was in a position to be able to do this. I could afford to work for $16,000 a year. And Bucky and I were trading stories, and he actually makes less. So and really it came down to the fact that I love the city of Dunwoody. I loved raising my children here. I loved running my business here. And I want this to be the kind of place that my kids will come back to and raise their family. So let me explain a little bit how this is going to work tonight. This is a conversation, and there's a chance to get questions answered. A lot of the one-way communication that happens in the city already is letters to the editor of the paper and public comment at city council meetings. A lot of you I recognize having been in city council meetings. The law basically says that we can have public comment in city council meetings, but we as the city council can't respond back. So we just have to sit there and kind of hold our tongue and sit on our hands and let people tell us what they think. We really aren't allowed to have that conversation back. So this is the opportunity for us to be able to tell you, and you can tell us, and we can actually answer back. So we received a lot of emails suggesting topics, and that's where this list came from right here. The emails that we got asking us to talk about these topics. Now, and the reason we're doing, and how many do we have so far, Warren? You have a number?
I don't have a count.
Okay, we had a tabulation going before, but it was starting to really ramp up. And I believe, Bob, we have cards. If people weren't able to make their text messages work, you could fill out a card, and that will be tabulated in. But the whole point of this is to make sure that we talk about the things you want to talk about. If one item up there is only one person in the room that wants to talk about it, we don't want to waste everyone else's time talking about that. That one topic can easily be handled by either your city councilman, Warren, or me on a one-off opportunity. So what we're going to do is we want this to be questions. It's not soapbox time. You know, soapbox time is when you write a letter to the editor or you go to city council meetings and do the public comment. This is a chance for you to ask a question and for us to answer. So what we're asking is that by the time you get to your third sentence, we need to hear a question mark at the end. Okay? So let's avoid the soapbox situation. We know that sometimes a question requires a little bit of build-up or story for you to explain why you're going to ask this question. But we want to make sure that it's not time to just talk for 3 minutes like you can at a city council meeting and just say anything you want. This is really get to your question as quickly as you can. So, with that said, off we go. Bucky, do you have questions, or Bob, do you have the?
He's got the question, but I've got a couple of other comments before we start. I'm sure this is a very respectful group, but let's be respectful to others' time. If it's, like you said, if it's an individual question that just relates to you and your property or your situation, please kind of take that to Warren or take that to the mayor personally or send an email. What we're looking to do is try to get community dialogue, things that are important to groups of people. So again, if you'll be very, forthcoming with if you need to make a comment at first and then bring up a question, and then we're going to let the mayor talk on each item first, because you may not have the latest and greatest information. So as each topic is brought up, the mayor's going to have a brief introduction, then we're going to open it, and we're going to spend no more than 10 minutes on a topic, and then we'll go to the next topic and try to get to as many of the important topics as we can tonight. So the first topic is?
Our first topic this evening is Chatcom. They're at the bottom with the most votes, and I'll let the opening statement.
Okay, Mayor.
Okay. Are we surprised by that, Bob?
No, sir.
All right, Chatcom. Chatcom 911 is a system that the city entered into that is our 911 system. We as a city, and this happened before Terry and Lynn and I were on the city council, but we have endorsed the process so far. Lynn, you're here. Okay. Okay. So you're going to be back and forth. Okay. Chatcom. The story basically is that we were not satisfied with the way DeKalb County was working our 911 system, and we were looking for a solution. Sandy Springs and Johns Creek both had entered into an agreement to start Chatcom 911. We joined not as a full member, but as a subscriber, which means that we didn't have to pay, I think it was, what, Warren, about $1.2 million to be a full member. Yeah. Warren's going to talk at some point, don't worry. He's going to tell us how many mayors he's already trained and how many he hopes to train at some point in his career. But Chatcom 911 is a system that Johns Creek and Sandy Springs started, and we are a subscriber. We are a member. And we use our 911 money. If you look at your phone bill, either your cell phone bill or your home phone bill, there's a $1.50 a month charge for that line that goes to 911, and that comes to Dunwoody. And we use that money to pay Chatcom. And that doesn't quite cover the total cost of what we have to pay Chatcom, but it's closer than I expected it to be. We went to Chatcom 911 for a number of reasons. First of all, we were not satisfied with the way DeKalb County's 911 system was working. But let me tell you what the results were from the beginning and where we are now, and some of the problems we've had, and then we'll take some questions if you want to get a little deeper into it. The first issue is that 90% of the calls are police calls. And 50% of the, let me rephrase that. 90% of the calls are police calls, and those calls go directly from Chatcom to our police. And we have cut that response time from when DeKalb County was giving us those police calls, we've cut that time in half. So 90% of the calls we now are able to respond to in half the time we were before. The other 10% of the calls are fire and EMS. Emergency calls. These tend to be not the cat in a tree story, but the heart attack, can't breathe, fell down, whatever. It's more of an emergency, and that's where the controversy has been coming in. Chatcom we're trying to set up what we call CAD to CAD. And that's a system where our computer system takes the information from the caller and loads that information into the DeKalb 911 system. So the person only has to talk to one person one time, and the information is automatically loaded into the computer system that DeKalb County has. The issue is DeKalb County gets 1 million 911 calls a year, And I don't remember the exact number of how many 911 fire and EMS calls we send in. It's like 30 or 40 a week. Is that?
It's 300 a month.
300 a month. Okay, 300 a month. I'm not big on the details. That's why Warren is always here. He always knows the right numbers. 300 calls a month so that's 10% of the calls are fire and EMS. Am I echoing a little bit? You got that, James? Yes. So, what we're trying to do, what we wanted to do, and what we've had trouble getting into the system is getting the 911 calls directly into the DeKalb computer system, so we only have to make one conversation and it automatically goes in. Right now what we're doing is what we call a one-button transfer, which is standard in the industry, but it does take a little bit longer. The 911 call is, you explain it to our Chatcom person, they realize what the story is, they then pass it on to the DeKalb people. And Warren, if I need more detail, you can
Sure. Yeah, I think from a process standpoint that the caller identifies what the nature of the emergency is, and once it's recognized that it is not a police call, it is fire and emergency call, that caller is then transferred to DeKalb County and to the call taker there, and then the process is repeated from the beginning. So that causes a delay in the response for the good folks from the DeKalb Fire Emergency Services to get rolling to the emergency. So what the CAD-to-CAD interface will do is eliminate the need to be able to do that one-button transfer. So it takes the data that's taken at Chatcom, put into the computer system, and then the dispatcher at DeKalb County is able to read that off the computer screen and then send the available fire emergency service resources. The overall benefit at the end of the day for our citizens will be that because Chatcom, because of their call volume and the way they're set up, answers the call faster than DeKalb answers it currently, it should have an overall faster delivery time than we had prior to going to Chatcom. And I think the challenge that we've had is twofold. One is that by switching over to Chatcom, we've put an inherent delay into the process for those 10% of the fire and emergency service calls. And then the other challenge is that we've had technical difficulties in being able to bring the system live within the time frame that we had hoped for. There are a number of parties that are involved in the process. We have different CAD vendors or computer vendors for DeKalb County and for Chatcom. And then we have 2 different 911 centers and 3 cities in 1 county working on the same project. So it's been a real challenge. This is something that has not been done in the state of Georgia and implemented, so we're sort of pressing new ground, and it's taken a lot longer than we hoped for. And hopefully we'll be able to bring quick resolution to the issue. As the mayor said, we're closing in on the finish line and hope to have the system live and up and running soon, which we think will dramatically improve emergency services in Dunwoody, which is really the ultimate goal, is to get to those emergencies faster for the benefit of our citizens.
Okay.
Hey, we've got 2 microphones, one on either side. So if you'll raise your hand right here, see one down, right back there. Wait till we get to you with the microphone right here.
Here we are. Here we are. The first question.
You
want us to answer, and I'll hold the microphone for you.
Just want to clarify. We are live on Chatcom. It's just the interface to DeKalb County that's being implemented.
Yes, that is true.
Okay, right down here. Do you have a question?
Where's the conversation?
Wait till he gets to you with the
Hold on a
microphone.
second. Here we have another question over here. Yes, sir.
It's not a question. Well, thank you, sir. You want to adjust it? I speak. Where is the conversation? You're making a presentation. Where's the conversation? What I'd like to know, no kidding, where I have an experience that I would hope that you guys would be interested in the deliverable, not about Chatcom, not about this, because it's very difficult. When you're under pressure to get a response that's tolerable. Question: why send a fire engine to a need that's physical, was explained, and they show up 5 people standing in a typical Dunwoody home. One says to the other, well, she needs this. And the other says, I don't think so. It's all about quality, and you have a life at stake. My question, this business about the dialogue, we can do this and we can do that, it's not safe to do that. I asked a question that may have saved my wife's life. Thank you.
All right. Mayor, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think, Mr. Harper, I think I can answer the question. If I'm off topic, please let me know. I think what you were asking was why, when the DeKalb Fire and Emergency Services responds to a medical emergency, does a ladder truck show up with 4 or 5 DeKalb firemen, paramedics, and EMTs for that type of emergency? And I think that's just part of the general service delivery model that we have, whereas the fire trucks have folks on them that are cross-trained, so they handle structure fires and other fire emergencies, but also handle medical calls. So you have on each truck what's called a advanced life support person who's trained, ALS trained, and that person will be a paramedic, and then you may also have EMTs on the truck. So they utilize the fire trucks as their transportation to be able to get to all the different emergencies, and it's just an efficient way to deliver the services to the citizens. And that's done pretty much all across Georgia.
Well, and we also, in Gwinnett County, every time a EMS is sent, they always send a fire truck. I've questioned that, but we do that in Gwinnett County too. Right up here.
We have a question over here.
First, I'd like to challenge 2 of your assertions. One is that while it may be true that 10% of the calls are fire, 90% are police, not all police calls are emergencies. So that there is a significant number of emergency or non-emergency calls that the balance between fire and emergency and police is not really a consistent comparison. That's number one. Number 2, although we say that it's the standard, industry standard, one-button transfer is nothing more than having DeKalb Fire on the speed dial of the phone. And to my question is, once you knew that it was going to take 2.5 or 3 years to do this, I could have set up an email account with DeKalb Fire and emailed from Chatcom to DeKalb and cut the time down while I'm waiting for CAD to CAD and one-button transfer. We haven't really been very creative about trying to resolve this except by going down one path.
Okay, one response.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the first part was more of a question, but there is a distinction on both the fire calls and the police calls as to what's really emergency versus non-emergency. Certainly, we have fire and emergency calls that, you know, I'm coughing or I have a cold. You get those at the same time as you get shortness of breath or a heart attack. And on the police calls, you certainly get calls that would not be, in retrospect, considered emergency. And really what 911 does is the dispatch system to get the police or fire to the scene. And that's how it works.
Okay, right over here.
Hi, I'm Maxine McQuaig. I'm a healthcare professional. I'm a registered nurse. I'm that lady that Chatcom put on call, and I'm not happy about it. If it had been 1 hour longer, I would have had to have a blood transfusion. And I want something done about it. I want to fire Chatcom.
Well, let me address that a little bit. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we listened to it. Number one, the fire truck got there in better than the standard time that we expect from DeKalb County. We got there quickly. As I recall, the story though was that it was DeKalb County that put you on hold, wasn't it? Okay, I thought it was DeKalb County.
There is no excuse, my David, for what happened to me.
All right, let's not speak out of turn, please. We'll take up for questions as we go. Go ahead, Mike.
But the answer is still that that from the beginning of the call to the fire department showing up at your house, it was less than 6 minutes. Now, we don't want anybody going on hold, but the reality is sometimes the 911 centers are overwhelmed for whatever reason, and that's out of our control. But it is a fact that the fire truck got there within the prescribed amount of time that we try to promise our citizens.
Okay, we have a question right here.
If the March 7th deadline, which I understand is the next CAD-to-CAD deadline, if that's not operational on March 7th, what is your plan?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that. You know, it certainly has been a fluid process, and it's taken longer than we wanted it to. And I'm disappointed in how long it's taken to be able to get this interface up and running. So first off, let me just apologize to our community for how long it's taken. You know, I think the most important aspect at this point is to make sure that it works properly. So we're in the process at this point of going into our final test of the system. At that point, if the test is successful, which we hope it will be, and that test I think is now scheduled for February 28th, at that point the Chatcom board the next day would take the appropriate steps to go ahead and authorize the go live of the system, and then we move forward. I think there's some element, as we discussed this with the City Council at the retreat, of sunk cost theory that goes into this. So we really are at the finish line at this point. As I said, the final test, if that's successful, we go to go live implementation. So I don't know that there's a better option that comes March 7th, March 8th, March 10th than finishing the job and getting this thing operational.
All right, another question.
Mayor Davis.
Yes.
If your software company that took care of your business didn't get the job done in 2.5 years, I dare say you'd replace them. And I think there are other options that if these people don't come in on March 7th, as we've promised and promised and promised, we need to look for alternatives.
Okay.
You want to respond?
Yeah, let me just address that just for a second. I agree. I think had we known that this would take this long, we would have done many things differently. But the reality is that, you know, there's a couple things I need to keep, we need to keep in mind here. You know, we're disappointed with how this went. There are a lot more hands in the puzzle than we thought there would be. The various vendors, the various governments. It's been an interesting experience since I've stepped into it to try to figure out who is able to make the promises and who can't. But I think two things we have to keep in mind as the City of Dunwoody is we know we know we're not going back to where we were 2.5 years ago, back to DeKalb County. That's not going to happen, and we know we're not going to do that. And just for an interesting piece of information, knowing all that this has been going on with the City of Dunwoody, I find this interesting, that knowing all of what has happened so far, the City of Brookhaven is begging Chatcom to take them on immediately, as is existing right now. Now they're hoping that we have all this solved by the time they come on, but I think those are two things that we look at. I think throwing out everything we've done so far and starting again is not good. But let's see what happens early March.
Right.
We have one more question right back here. Go ahead.
Warren, you didn't really answer the question.
Okay.
What would occur after March 7th? And you seem to set an example for us to fail again. And Mayor Davis, despite saying that all this seems to come as a surprise, it really hasn't. So my question to you, Warren, yes or no, if things are not fully operational on March 7th, will you send in your resignation?
Thank you for the question, Joe. No, I don't have any intent of submitting my resignation.
Okay, one more question on Chatcom. We'll move to the next item.
My name is Danny Ross. My question is, starting on March 28, 2011, you, Warren, started committing to the council and into the city that this was going to be ready in time for the October 3rd, 2011 cutover. And since that time, I have 28 different times that you've presented to the council that we're just about, like you're doing tonight, just about going to be ready. And the next one little thing has to be done. When are you going to start being honest with the people of this community? Number one. Number two, whenever you get this developed, is it going to be a bi-directional system, Warren, or is it going to be a one-way conversation where you're just pushing the data over to CAB and there's no communication back live from the CAD system in DeKalb County?
First off, I think every time that I've presented information to the council, it's with the best information that I have, and it's with the best expectation that I have going forward. So I think in any claim that I've been dishonest with the citizens of the council, I think it's just not true. Secondly, the system is not, by definition, bi-directional in that the information is pushed from Chatcom over to DeKalb County. There is a heartbeat connection between the two systems to make sure that there is a live connection. There are notes fields that can be filled in if further information that would also be presented back to the dispatcher. And then there are standard procedures that Chatcom and DeKalb have agreed to be able to update as information becomes changes as the call evolves over time. So all of those safeguards are in place.
Thank you. Okay, next area that we're going to speak about is what, Bob?
Our next topic is it has roundabout has received most votes. So, okay, we'll allow an introduction there on that.
Mike, you want to give a little?
Okay. Before I get into that, our state senator is here now, Fran Miller, of the intersection and the council, because the reality is we as a city council never actually had the solutions presented to us yet. That was one of the solutions. We've kicked it around, we tried to figure out how best to do it, but right now we're not going forward with it. I don't know when we're going to get back to that intersection. I'm disappointed because it is still a terribly broken intersection, and it took me about 15 minutes to get here from City Hall to get to this meeting at about 6:25. I don't know what the solution is. We need to do something, I believe, but right now I don't think the City Council has any stomach for it because we've got a lot of other intersections that need to be repaired.
Okay, let's see if we have any questions about that. Got one right here, coming down here. Hang on, wait till they get to you with the microphone so everybody can hear the. Not sure where he's going to end up.
Here we are.
Thank you. Of the viable solutions that have been considered, which one provides the best throughput?
Yeah,
try that one?
I'd be happy to. I think the
question I know.
Yeah, I think the question, if I can repeat it, was that which of the solutions that the engineers had looked at was the most viable for the intersection. When we did the consulting study, there's a couple of pieces to it. One is that you look at it from a purely technical standpoint, and you look at it from the standpoint of what will reduce the traffic congestion at that intersection, what's the most efficient way to move cars through there. But that's not the only consideration I think the city and the city council is looking at. There's a number of other factors. Safety is certainly a paramount and most important factor. Cost is also a factor, and impacts on the neighborhoods, impacts on speed. So there's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle. And one of the things that we do in Dunwoody, which is a little bit unique, is that we look at these intersection improvements and we bring a public process to that. That doesn't happen in every community. And so we have public meetings, we have meetings with the neighborhoods, the council members get out and meet with the folks, and we take input into the process. And I think that this is an example. There was significant neighborhood input that was considered by the city, and the solution that is the most efficient from a traffic standpoint, which is the roundabout, it may not be the best solution for the city. And as the mayor said, at this point, I don't think there's a consensus on what is the best solution, looking at all those factors. And we have 11 other failing intersections to take a look at, and that's why we're going to move in that direction.
Okay. Another question.
Would you remind us again what the cost of that study was, please? And were all of those people aware that there were the 3 schools nearby, as well as the library, at the time the study was being done?
Bob,
yeah, I didn't hear the second part of the question.
You dropped out right at the end there.
Which part? Can you, were the people who did the study aware of the fact that there were 3 schools nearby?
Yes, they were aware that there were schools in the area.
And the first part of that was what was the cost of the study?
I have to get back with you on that. As to the cost, I don't recall the exact number on the study. So I apologize, don't have that number off the top of my head, but I'd be happy after the meeting to get that to you.
Okay.
My question is, the City of Dunwoody keeps saying that pedestrians are a priority for them. The roundabout has been squashed. So when do you intend to make pedestrians a priority at that intersection? You didn't get your way at the roundabout, and so your attitude is now we won't do anything. You only built the sidewalks part of the way on Womack. You only put the sidewalks part of the way on Vermac. Pedestrians are not a priority for you at that intersection at the moment. When are you going to make them a priority? When are you going to make it safer for our children to walk to school through that intersection?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm not sure. The city council got pretty beaten up and bruised on any discussion about that intersection, and no one has really come to us with a suggestion or a solution. It's every solution we try to put forward, whether it's the Hawkeye system of getting kids to cross the street and be able to push the button and stop all the traffic. Everything has been attacked. So my feeling is, if the neighborhood comes to us with some solutions, we would love to entertain those. But right now, it's everything we've tried to put forward has been attacked. And okay, go ahead.
My question is, what can be done on Mount Vernon Road to take care of the residents who have lived here for so many years? They cannot get out of their subdivision onto Mount Vernon Road. There are several nice subdivisions along Mount Vernon, from Abernathy on down to Jet Ferry. These people have a terrible time trying to get out into the road. So can the city please do something to consider the residents that live here, not only care about those that are trying to drive through and get through it, but to allow the residents who live here to be able to get out of their subdivision into the street?
I recommend passports.
Let me address that just for a second, because it's interesting, because I've had it's been surprising to me, because I was worried about the same thing, and a lot of people who live in those side streets off of Mount Vernon actually say that they're surprised at how courteous the people are in letting them out, and they don't have to wait very long. I don't know unless you consider more than 2 or 3 cars long, but most of these people are, because traffic is moving pretty slowly there, most people are able to get out into traffic without a big problem. The solution beyond that is, do we put a light at every intersection? And that's not going to happen, obviously. So I'm not sure how to fix that, but I think it's an issue that is not as big an issue as I think.
All right, right here.
My question is, I know that we have some deteriorated water pipes, and that is holding us up on some of our improvements. Have we worked out a kind of negotiation with DeKalb County to where we can address that in a speedier process? In addition, I got another question.
Hold on 1 second. Are we talking about along Mount Vernon Road?
Yeah.
Okay,
we've already
gotcha.
replaced
I just
some.
wanted, I don't know the whole story.
Another question I have is are we ever going to revisit our transportation master plan and review it and kind of make some modifications? I know the DHA actually voted against widening Mount Vernon. Currently in the master plan, I think it's scheduled to be 3 lanes. I'm just curious if we're going to look at the master plan as a whole and the transportation plan.
Sure.
Okay, sewer and...
let me address all 3 of those. Yes, one of the challenges that we have of being an older city is that the infrastructure is also fairly old. So we have some water pipes that run along Mount Vernon in different sections that are over 40 years old and are failing. So we're in the last stages of finalizing an intergovernmental agreement with DeKalb County. And what that will allow for is allows the city to go ahead and manage both the water project to replace the lines on Mount Vernon in certain sections in conjunction with doing either paving or intersection projects that we have on our schedule. So they'll be coordinated. The worst thing ever is when you go ahead and pave the road and then a week later somebody comes in and rips it up to replace a water line. You got a huge patch in the road you just paved. And also from a coordinational standpoint, the timing will move a lot faster. So we're about to be able to bring that to City Council for intergovernmental agreement with the county. That answers the first question that you had. The second question dealt with the Comprehensive Transportation Master Plan, and I would argue that what the plan is for Mount Vernon in the Comprehensive Transportation Plan is not to widen the entire route to 3 lanes, but it's to create turn lanes throughout. And so in a lot of sections it would be 3 lanes with the turn lane. In a lot of sections it already is 3 lanes through a lot of that roadway. So it may be semantics, but I think it's an important distinction. And then the third is, are we going to review and redo our transportation master plan? Absolutely. Typically, after a 5 to 10 year period is the appropriate time to go in and review that to make sure that one, conditions haven't changed. Secondly, we may have changed our mind about what our priorities are and what our solutions are as we evolve. So I think the council will be taking a look at that in the next couple of years. Maybe not starting from absolute scratch, but taking a look at projects that we know are not high priorities anymore, or things that we need to do differently, and that process will also involve the public in moving forward. So I think in a couple of years is when we can expect to do that. We only passed this plan 2 to 3 years ago.
Okay, right here.
The state DOT has adopted the complete street policy, which I think the City of Dunwoody has as well. And we've seen its application on Mount Vernon from Ashford Dunwoody west to Sandy Springs. And my observation, because I use that segment a couple times a day, is that it's moving a lot better and more pedestrians and bicyclists are using it because of the facilities which have been added. Do you envision that moving eastward towards Gwinnett as that segment applies the transportation plan improvements?
Well, Bob, I think to answer that carefully, I don't know without looking back at the plan and looking exactly what the details are as to where we have bike facilities versus bike routes and sidewalks being installed in. So I can get back with you with that answer.
Let me just address that very quickly too. The interesting thing about Mount Vernon is that it's a vastly different road west of the center of town versus east of the center of town. West of the center of town, there's only a couple of streets that exit out, and there are very few driveways along there. Whereas we're going east of the center of town, it's a ton of driveways, a lot more streets, and a lot more action going on there. So I think it's going to, I would like to see something comprehensive across the entire area, but it's going to have to look very different than the west side.
Okay, right here.
I understand that the priority on Mount Vernon is relieving the traffic going east-west through the city, and as someone who travels it, I certainly appreciate that. But as someone who lives off of Mount Vernon and has to come out onto it every single day, is it on the city's agenda to examine the timing and the sensors on those traffic lights in off hours? Because I can sit for 9 minutes to exit at Manhasset at Mount Vernon on a morning and end up having to turn right in order to exit legally because the light never changes.
Yes, one of the major strategies within our transportation plan is to look at light timing on the traffic lights and try to time them in a way to be able to move the traffic efficiently, but also letting folks in and out of the area. So that's certainly a high priority for us, and it's a very efficient, cost-efficient solution.
Sorry.
Yeah, let me add something to that, because there are smart lights out there now where right now it's just it's a timing situation. There are systems available now that actually recognize when cars are in line, and not just the tripwire that's built into the road, but actually the light has it built in. And so I see us going in that direction eventually. But I think you're right. I think nothing worse than sitting there especially in the middle of the night, knowing that, you know, that nothing is coming and you're sitting there for 4 or 5 minutes at a red light. Nothing.
Okay, right here.
There's a turn lane at Mount Vernon and Mount Vernon Way. Why is there not a turn lane at Mount Vernon and Vermac when we have that heavy traffic from St. Luke's? We have Dunwoody High School. The other schools are involved, and that is really a bottleneck for those of us trying to go toward Dunwoody Village.
One of the 11 intersections that we're looking at is the Mount Vernon Vermac intersection, and that is in the design process at this point, and a turn lane is the solution for that intersection, is adding a protected left-hand turn lane. But it has not been finalized yet by the council to move toward the construction process, but we're moving in that direction.
Just to give you a quick idea, I think much to our city council's surprise, it takes a lot longer to get from concept to finished intersection. I think when we first were elected, we were thinking, what, a year and a half. It's actually more like 3.5 years, especially when you build in
Welcome
the fact,
to government.
I know, welcome to government. But what happens is, as we mentioned earlier, you've got the whole plan, then you find out that there's, you know, you've got to address the water runoff, because when the intersection was originally built, water runoff wasn't addressed by the county. And as Warren said, the infrastructure underneath the road is 40 years old, and this infrastructure is all designed to last 40 years. So the key is getting the county to come in and do the work before we tear the whole thing up and pour pavement. I hope that answers the question.
Is there any more questions or comments about Mount Vernon Road? Okay, right here.
Let's make this the last one then.
Okay.
This burden doesn't really lie completely on the current city council board, but we've been talking about retiming lights in the city of Dunwoody for 5 years now since we've been a city. Why hasn't it happened?
Okay, the question was...
It has happened.
Okay.
There's, we've done a significant amount of automation to the traffic system. It requires putting fiber in to connect all of the traffic control boxes, and then also having monitoring of those intersections, so remotely you can go ahead and change as traffic conditions change. So we're in the process of being able to move that through all the signals within the city. So all of the PCID area, and also if you've noticed on the Chamblee Dunwoody, through the Dunwoody Village area, is also signal timing has been added and modified and enhanced in that area. So we've done a lot. We've got a lot to go.
Okay, what's our next topic?
Our next topic is street sweepers.
Do we have any volunteer street sweepers?
All right, want to speak on this?
Yeah, I will. I'm not sure exactly where we're going with that.
It's the machine.
Sorry, I apologize. Let me back up. I apologize. There have been some last-minute votes in the last minute.
Okay.
The Main Street project is the next topic.
How about street sweepers on Main Street? No.
Yes, I think we can combine.
Main Street project.
Okay, the Main Street project. We're talking about Dunwoody Village Parkway and what's taking place there. Basically, one of the issues that new cities have in the entire metro area is identifying your city center. Most of the new cities, and look at any of them, from Peachtree Corners to Sandy Springs to Brookhaven, identifying where your actual city center is has been difficult. Well, we in Dunwoody were actually lucky. We know where our city center is. It's at the junction of Mount Vernon and Chamblee Dunwoody. What we wanted to do is we wanted to bring a streetscape renaissance, for lack of a better word, an opportunity to turn this into something very akin to what you see on Canton Street up in Roswell, Courthouse Square in Decatur, where we have businesses that build their stores and their restaurants and their galleries up to the sidewalk and end up with a streetscape that will attract that kind of opportunity. The reality is Dunwoody was built in the 60s and 70s when the model was to put the stores at the very back of the property with a sea of parking between the street and the front of the store. Well, the new style is to make it more walkable and do things like you see at Canton Street in Roswell, which I think is what we envision happening. We in the city of Dunwoody were lucky. Number one, we have what we all, I think, consider to be pretty much the city center. We also were lucky in the fact that we actually had a road that we could do something with, kind of like Canton Street. Canton Street isn't the main road that goes through that part of Roswell. Actually, whatever they call it, Alpharetta Highway or something right there, is the main road that goes through there. But it's always picturesque to go on Canton Street, and the other end of Canton Street actually gets you there. So that's where we're going with this. It was a grant that Fran Miller originally got for us a number of years ago, and the City Council has sliced it and diced it and tried to make it fit with what we could do in our city. And one thing I just want to mention before we take questions is this is an interesting dilemma for a city council. A lot of people say, you know, the city shouldn't spend that money. We should make the businesses do that because it's for them. But I don't really agree with that. And I struggled with this when it was first come up because it was something that had already been handed to us as a new city council 2 years ago. It was already in place and moving forward. And the question was, do we want to go forward with this or not? And the city council ended up voting to move forward. I think we had a lot of different ideas going forward. But let me just get to the crux of it, which is the fact that if a city doesn't make this infrastructure change, and Courthouse Square is a good example in Decatur. 20 years ago, and Bill Floyd, the old mayor of Decatur, refers to it as their 20-year miracle. They came up with this idea 20 years ago, spent the money, and got skewered by the citizens. Why are you spending this kind of money where all the bums live? Why would you do this? You're going to spend all this money so the bums have a nicer place to sleep? Well, the whole idea was to create a city center and a place where you could park your car. And Canton Street, and the same thing at Courthouse Square. You can park your car and tell your spouse, we're going out to dinner and we're going to Canton Street. And hopefully it'll be Dunwoody Village Parkway in a few years. But you can go to Canton Street right now and have no idea where you're going to have dinner. You park your car, and whatever sound of music is coming out of one door, or however long the line is at another door, or whatever smell is coming out of the third door. You then decide where you want to eat. And you don't have to, as we do in Dunwoody now, you want to go out to dinner and you get there and it's a 45-minute wait and that's longer than you want to go. You got to get back in your car and drive to another place. You get there and that's the same thing. You get back in your car and do it again. The whole idea is to make this a livable, walkable area. And we're lucky that we have this street. It's very, a lot of these new cities don't have anything like this. And it's very difficult for them to get what they want. And what we want to have is something very similar. You know, here we have Bucky Johnson here. If you go into the center of Norcross on their square, it's a lot of restaurants, a lot of shops, a lot of really neat things, and you can go there without having decided what you were going to do or where you're going to eat. And that's what we'd like to see, and we think we have the opportunity.
And that creates community too, which is a terrific thing. We have a comment or question about the main, right back here. Yes, sir, right up here.
Hi, my name is Bob Uzinski. I'm a resident.
Speak up a little bit.
Does this help a little bit if I get closer to the mic? Okay, good. So first, I'd just like to comment. I used to live in Roswell. I think Canton Street had those buildings on Canton Street for years. Second, I've read the development plan that's out on the city website. And overall, I think that the vision looks like a nice one. But the problem that I have is that I look at that plan, and I don't see anywhere in the 13 steps that are listed there anything that indicates how the city intends to acquire the property or get development control over the property. So my question is, if the people who own the property now have not bought into the plan of the city center, how do you envision getting these buildings and businesses where there's parking lot today?
That's an excellent question. And I'll answer it this way: is that one is the city does not intend to buy up the property and develop it as a private developer. That's not our role. Our role is to create an investment on the public side that will inspire investment on the private side. And the way we do that, one is streetscaping is an excellent investment into the community that typically private investment will follow that. All of the out parcels except for the Marlowe's piece are owned by different owners along Dunwoody Village Parkway. They're not Regency Shopping Center parcels, except for the Marlowe's piece. So we've got a number of different property owners to be talking to. The second thing that cities do is they put in zoning and design guidelines that encourage the type of development that you want, so that as these landowners make investments into their property, they need to follow the vision of the community and how they develop that property. So some of those will be design elements, as the mayor alluded to, is that as they redevelop and recapitalize their properties, they have to move those buildings up to the street. We're putting in 6 feet of sidewalk along the roadway. When they develop property, they're going to have to put the next 6 feet of sidewalk to create that wide sidewalk that you see in a lot of these other communities. So one is that we're making the investment, and the second is we're putting the rules and regulations into our zoning that match up with what the community expectation is as this develops. And as the mayor said, and I think it's a great line that Mayor Floyd had in Decatur, that it was the overnight miracle that took 20 years to plan and implement. And I think that's what we're going to be facing here. Is it's not going to be 2015, the streetscape's in, and all of a sudden, you know, all these buildings just come racing up to the street and we're done. This is going to be a long-term process, an evolution as we go forward. And the city's taken that first step to make that area attractive to private development, and then also add the pedestrian capacity that we don't have any of that currently.
Okay, we got a question right down here with the white shirt.
Are there any plans for the city to provide any kind of economic incentive to bring businesses, or you're just assuming and hoping if we build it, they will come?
I don't believe that we would be providing any economic incentives. You know, when you look at demographic studies and you look at, you know, sort of how the community is developed, Dunwoody's the best place, and not just because I'm a city manager and live here, but Dunwoody's the best place to open up a business in Metro Atlanta, hands down. We do have a few banks. I guess we have a lot of money too, but you know, so I think that there is, again, you know, from a development pattern standpoint, I think that's a good point. Is that what banks look for is a concentration of wealth. They're also looking for vehicular access, drive-throughs, parking lots, and visibility. And we've had all that for a number of years. But as we change what the public infrastructure looks like, I think you're going to start to see investments coming in. And we've had a few examples. There's a new, the owners of, if you're familiar with Soto and Freedy down in Atlanta, that owner has bought into or leasing the Peters location, is going to put in a high-end, fast casual Italian restaurant there. And one of the things they told us when we asked them, why do you want to make this investment in Dunwoody, was, you know, we reviewed the plans that you had and we want to be part of that going forward. We think there will be a lot of that, and I think, again, it's going to be an evolution over time. And I don't think that we're going to be doing any handouts of tax dollars to get people to come to Dunwoody Village. It's the best place in town, and I think the folks will want to come there. As we make our investments, they'll make theirs.
Okay, right here.
Maybe I'm a little naive, but how can you build a city around the post office?
I mean, the post office does exist, and I tell you, if you look at a lot of good traditional downtowns, post office is one of the main anchor tenants in there. Is that building the most attractive building in Dunwoody? No, clearly not. Is it going to change over the course of time? I do think so. And again, it's a matter of over time. And I think we'll be able to adjust around the post office and make it an asset.
Okay, we got two more questions, one here and one here.
Are we planning to move any of the city government offices to the center of town then?
You know, that's going to be a political decision by the city council when the time comes.
We've got about 6-7 years left on the existing lease that we have over Perimeter Center. And the city council will have to make some decisions whether or not they want to renew the lease there, lease property in the village, work with a developer to be a long-term tenant in the building there, or to buy property and build a city hall. And all those options come with pros and cons, and I think there's some desire you know, by the city to be a part of the center, but there's other areas of town that will also make attractive options. So I don't think any decisions have been made as to where permanent city hall may be located.
All right, we're going to do 2 more questions on this topic, and then we're going to open it to any topic there. So back up top there.
Do you plan to have left turn lanes at either end of the Village Parkway?
Could you repeat that?
Do you plan to have left turn lanes at either end of the Village Parkway?
Yes, there will be a left-hand turn lane at both the Chamblee-Dunwoody intersection and the Mount Vernon intersection.
Okay, last question.
To follow up on that, traffic seems to be a big issue, 2 of the 4 major issues. And I work in the buildings overlooking Village Burger. How are you going to keep traffic moving, given that when I drive in the morning between 9 and 10 o'clock, the traffic is backed up from Dunwoody Village Parkway back to almost the homes going east?
Right.
How are you going to keep traffic moving when you reduce it from 2 lanes to 1 lane? I can't figure that out.
That's a good question. I think, well, we've got 2 sort of factors going on now. One is that we have done a detailed traffic study prior to this project and looking at whether or not shifting from having 4 lanes on the parkway to 2 makes sense. The traffic study and the engineering that we looked at all pointed to the road has significant overcapacity to be able to move cars between those 2 areas. So I think that answers that question for me, that there will be plenty of capacity left with 2 lanes as we had with 4. Obviously it'd be less capacity, let me restate that, doesn't make sense, but we'll have enough capacity to be able to move cars along that road. And I think the other thing that's a little bit more current right now, and I travel that route, I've got 2 daughters at Austin, so I'm on Roberts and then coming to work from there. To Perimeter Center, certainly know what you're talking about on the traffic of Roberts. I think part of that right now is they're doing some significant construction at the North Bridge and 400 that's causing some delays along Roberts going southbound in the morning. And I think that will pass as the bridge is completed at that intersection. So I think we're going to see improvement.
Okay, we're going to open this up. I'm going to take the State Farm question. Is that what's there?
Yeah, Mayor, I want to know what plans you have for setting up some kind of a dialogue with State Farm to see how we can set into the community with peace.
Let me make sure, dialogue with State Farm to be involved in the community, is that where you're going?
Yes.
Okay. Well, interestingly, and put this on your calendar, March 6th, the city is putting on the State of the City address, which the mayor gives on a yearly basis. And the head of State Farm in the Southeast is going to be the beginning speaker and introduce me. So we've got meeting. I think I've got a meeting with them tomorrow. We've been meeting with them on a regular basis. They are, you know, they are very concerned about what is going to happen in Dunwoody as a result of them showing up. And they're looking at how they can help mitigate that. For instance, and I'm not sure this is quite done yet, but one of the things that is being talked about is, if you know the piece of property, kitty corner across from the MARTA station, the Hammond Exchange building, they own that piece of property, and they own the property where Fuddruckers and Checkers is. Well, the property behind the property kitty corner across where Hammond Exchange is, we are talking about partnering with Sandy Springs to run another road that goes east-west from Dunwoody, Peachtree Dunwoody Road over to that road, whatever it's called, with the bridge to nowhere.
Yeah, and I think, let me just add on to that would not be funded by the city of Dunwoody. That would be a privately funded extension between Perimeter Center Parkway and Peachtree Dunwoody by either grant funds or the private landowners in that area. But we're looking at a couple of things. One is, as Mayor was saying, is adding that additional crossroad capacity, looking at the intersection of Hammond and Perimeter Center Parkway. The other thing that is into this design at this point is a direct connection between the building that State Farm will be occupying and the MARTA station. So in other words, they would be able to go through their lobby and get on the platform at MARTA and not have to come out onto the roadway. which would encourage significant amount of usage. About 15% of their employees that are already here in Dunwoody right now utilize MARTA, and part of the goal is to increase that usage to keep those vehicles off the road. I think it's also important to note that the property that they're going to be putting a ton of development on. When you look at 2 million square feet of new construction it's huge. That was what was entitled on the property, and a little bit of a different mix. In the previous versions, it had residential, hotel, commercial, and this version eliminates the residential component. It has just the office and hotel and retail components. So one of the things that we're doing right now, being that this development's not going to happen tomorrow, is working to develop plans going into the future of how we can deal with the capacity issues that this development's going to bring. Because also across catty corner to this development, which is called High Street, which is also entitled, is a $1 billion development that may start to occur in the next few years as well. Once they get going on that construction, that's also going to add to the traffic in that corner of the city. So we better be prepared for the volume of cars coming through there, and that'll be what our focus is going forward, is to make sure that we're prepared to be able to handle the traffic. And as the mayor said previously, we've been in discussions with State Farm for the last year on trying to figure out ways that we can collaborate together so they can have a positive impact on our community, besides the 10,000 jobs that they're going to bring to the community, which will be a huge benefit.
Wow.
Let me just touch on that a little bit
go
more
ahead.
of that, just for a second. A lot of people want to know why all of that was built in the perimeter, because 40, 50 years ago that was all farmland. And people ask, how did this happen? How did all of a sudden we have all this? As you know, the High Street piece of property has 3,000 living units granted to it in its zoning. The Hammond Exchange piece of property that State Farm bought has 900 units promised on that piece of property. We have about 4,500 living units, mostly apartments, but some condos. Those have been granted to that land and that landowner
prior to the
prior to the city becoming a city, but by DeKalb County. But it wasn't necessarily DeKalb County's fault either, as far as I can tell. Most of this ended up being granted as a result of lawsuits at the Supreme Court and the Superior Court. I'm not sure which one it was, Fran, you remember? But most of this ended up being granted as a result of lawsuits. And this all went from being farmland to very, very high dollar, very valuable office land, to a point where, I don't know if you've heard, but the piece of property that the State Farm bought from Checkers is 4 acres. It's right there next to the MARTA platform, and they paid $8 million an acre for it. And that's the kind of money you get. They charge in Midtown for land, and we've never seen anything like that in Dunwoody. But the key is that these grants, these encumbrances are with the land now. As Warren said, we are negotiating with State Farm now to try to figure out how we can get rid of that 900 apartment units that they've already been promised by encouraging them to do something else. So I think one of the reasons we became a city, the two main things that I keep in the back of my mind as mayor is the two things that we don't want to do in Dunwoody is allow more apartments and raise taxes. And those are the two things I wake up with every morning. And the good news is we've eliminated about 240 or 50 apartment units that were on the Pipe Farm property, where now Project Renaissance is being built with John Whelan. And we're on our way, we hope, to getting rid of 900 more units on the Hammond Exchange property. So that's what we're working on, trying to figure out ways to keep more apartments from being built in Dunwoody. But so I don't think a lot of people are aware of how the promises were made and where these came from. But they go with the land now, and the owner, if as somebody said, why don't you just tell them they can't build it? Well, that ends up as a lawsuit that we lose. So.
All right, right here.
You seem to have drifted away from the Main Street project, but I have one question. Aren't you ignoring, when you make the comparison to Canton Street and Courthouse Square in Decatur, that both of those areas were rundown areas, and that they found this a way to salvage a problem. And I don't understand, I don't see the rundown area on the Parkway. And could you explain how you tied these two projects, that project rather, to these two examples that you're quoting quite frequently?
I think if I could, Mr. Mayor, I think the point that we're trying to make is not necessarily that they had the same genesis point, but the character of those streets are something that we think would be attractive for Dunwoody Village Parkway. And that's the point I'm trying to make. Not that they're identical situations in how their genesis or the reason for creating them, but the end result is what we're after.
Okay, back in the back.
All of my friends and I have to leave Dunwoody for sports. Do you have any plans to change the master plan of Brook Run Park to include sport fields?
All right, a young person question. Thank you.
Brought the average age down a little bit. Thank you. You know, that's a good question.
Repeat the question.
I'm sorry. The question is, does the City of Dunwoody have any plans to turn part of Brook Run into active sports fields? That was the question, right, Bob? Active sports fields.
Yes, that was the question.
That's an interesting question. I think that's going to be an argument that the City Council is going to have. I think there's a portion of our City Council that doesn't want active sports but wants to have passive sports, where we have large fields where games can happen. An active sports field, if I believe that what you're asking, is something akin to Morgan Falls over in Sandy Springs or Murphy Candler Parks down in Brookhaven. We have active fields currently over in the senior baseball fields over on Roberts, right down the street from Austin Elementary School. Personally, I would like to see active sports in the back part of Brook Run Park. It's back near the middle school. I think there's an opportunity for us to do something. I think we've done a lot of things in Dunwoody, but the one thing we seem to be skipping over is what can we provide for the very youngest of our community, the people that don't necessarily vote, but they certainly count. So, but I think it's going to be an interesting argument that the City Council is going to have. I think I can't tell you how it's going to go.
Okay, next.
I have a question for the City of Dunwoody. Are we able to do anything about the residences here where people are not taking care of their property? They're storing all kinds of junk, running businesses out of their yard. This is a code compliance issue that Cobb County has adopted, and I'm wondering if the City of Dunwoody would be able to review some of those codes and possibly get those adopted for the city. We have some properties here where they have tractor-trailer truck in the driveway. The growers make lots of noise. It's out-of-state cars, out-of-state trucks, out-of-county vehicles that are stored. The Roys and their toys are great, but can anything be done with the Roy toy thing for them to store their toys and their junk somewhere else?
Okay, one person's junk is another person's trash. I don't know. Good luck with that question.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To answer your question, we do have a code compliance division with the city to deal with complaints about the property maintenance code, and then also any violation of the code of ordinances for the city. And we do deal with those. And our strategy, one, is that we respond to complaints based on the number of personnel that we have for the city. And those civilian folks enforce the code that we have in place, which does deal with a number of the issues that you're discussing. Could our codes be improved and adjustments made? Absolutely, and then certainly I know that the City Council always is willing to look at how we can make improvements to our codes if necessary, and those will be reviewed as suggestions come about.
And one other thing, I'll just speak on the code enforcement, is many people don't know what the codes are. So part of that is an education piece where you have to, sometimes you have to let people know that that's not appropriate. And but the reporting by the neighbors is a lot of times how they're going to know that. So that's when you need to let City Hall know when you think something's out of whack.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This town hall is a great idea.
Hold the microphone up a little closer.
Yeah, closer.
Thank you.
There? All right, very good.
Good.
My name is James Baldwin. I've been here since 1983.
Yeah,
My wife and I
closer.
bought 2 homes here. And I want to go back to the Main Street initiative. And my question is, was this redevelopment put to vote to the members of the community? And if the answer is no, why not?
Okay, that's a good question, and Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, I'll take that one. No, it was not taken to a vote of referendum, and what we operate under in Georgia, better or worse, is most decisions are made under the representative form of democracy, where the citizens elect a city council and a mayor that are their neighbors to make policy decisions based on research, based on input from the citizens. And that's how most decisions are made. There are issues under Georgia law that require referendum, but this was not one of them.
And also, the comprehensive plans are plans that are made by city, and all of those have tremendous citizen input. So again, we can't read your minds, so be sure that you have an opportunity to go to those type of community events when you have comp plan updates, and there's always citizen input at those. Okay, right up here.
My name is Jim Kelly. First, I'd like to thank you for being open-minded enough. I know town hall meetings weren't your main priority coming into office, but I'm glad to see that you're opened your mind, and hopefully it'll be like the Main Street project, and we'll get these things working better and better. My question is this. If we go to the most egregious example in Cobb County where a couple people decided it might be a good idea to get the Braves ballpark to move there, and there wasn't a lot of citizen input, we have smaller issues where I feel like there is a groundswell of opinions against something, and there is no, I would say, conduit for really assessing whether people, or the majority of Dunwoody is for or against something, be it the Village Parkway. Maybe the majority of people were for that Main Street project, the dog park, or say the concrete pathway through Brook Run, making it wider and spending more money. I was going to ask you your opinion, and you don't need any facts from Mr. Hutmacher for this one. What is your opinion on what would be the best way, something like we have up here with the texting, to get the pulse of Dunwoody, so that some of these projects that the majority of citizens do not want do not happen?
Okay.
Mayor?
I'll do that. Each project is different, but let me just hit on the trail through Brook Run Park. We did a parks master plan, had many meetings, and to come up with what it was the citizens wanted. And interestingly, by a factor of 80%, the number one item that people said they wanted in our parks and running through the city was multi-use trails. And this was, it was by far and away, the largest item that showed up on the survey. And you'll see these trails are happening all over the state, probably all over the country. But we as a city council have walked many trails and seen how popular they are, let alone how popular the one in Brook Run is. We also, what you read in the paper, or what a group of people who really want to make sure that they're heard and heard loud try to do is make sure that we move in a certain direction. But the reality is, we on City Council receive dozens of emails going both directions. And a lot of these things are, we know that when we when we raise our hand, one way or the other, on something that's going on in the city, whether it's Dunwoody Village Parkway or the Brook Run Trail, or any of the other things that are going on, we know as soon as we raise our hand, we've picked up a new enemy. And as a politician, you accumulate enemies. Isn't that right, Bucky?
That's what I've heard.
People will agree with you 80, 90% of the time, but you don't go with their pet project, and you've accumulated someone that will make sure, that will work hard to vote against you. But I look out in the audience, and and I recognize that we need to do a little bit better job, I think, getting this information out there. But I look at the crowd here tonight, and aside from the young lady in the back who had a question, most of you are my age or older. And yet the city of Dunwoody's average age is, I think, 37 or 38. And so we as a city council represent 47,000 people. And we have to be very careful not to be pushed and swayed by a very vocal minority, which is in some cases what we end up feeling. We get dozens of emails and people say, I haven't got time to go to these meetings, but I really like what you're doing here, I really like what you're doing there. And I don't agree with all the letters I'm reading in the paper or all the blogs I'm reading. And I just want to let you know that I'm hang in there and, keep a stiff upper lip is kind of what we get a lot of as city council people. And the hard part is coming to a meeting like this where, this is the crowd that wants to be here to make sure we don't do the things that the people who are too busy with their young kids and their jobs and all that other stuff to be able to come out and counter that. So we have to, when you raise your hand, you're gonna make somebody angry every single time you do it on city council. And and it comes down to the fact that you just basically have to go with what you truly believe is right. There's nothing in it for me to get a trail through Brook Run Park except my dogs and my kids like it, my grandkids, I should say, and I weigh everything, and the rest of city council, it's not just me, the rest of city council weighs everything. And and a lot of times I think I know what the right thing to do is, and they vote me down 5-2. And how can you guys be so stupid? But it just happens. And and things that that pass. So there's a lot of give and take. But in the end, we as the elected representatives do what we truly believe is the very best for the city.
Hear, hear. I like that. Up here, another question.
I just had a few comments. One,
that was my closing.
When Mr. Hutchmatcher says we're a republic and we vote for you guys and you're going to do what you think is right, something to keep in mind is we weren't allowed to choose a town form of government. In the Northeast, you can be a city or a town, and you'll have towns as big as 80,000 people, like Framingham, that is a town. They don't want to be a city. Dunwoody thinks and feels like a town, not a city. We have the city form of government because that's what Georgia mandated. The city form of government requires a mayor and representatives who represent us. But we're not looking to you guys for solutions for us. We want you to listen to us and do what we want and not throw in our face that we're a republic and that's just the way it is and we got to live with it. We didn't have a choice to be a town. Towns up in the Northeast, when they throw a new Main Street in, get a quorum and they vote on it as a town. To me, you can vote on these projects and you should, at the very least, if you don't vote, put up a poll. There was a poll, and to keep dismissing that poll as a frenzied minority group of people, which is what's coming through to me, a vocal minority, is insulting. A poll went up, it was open to anyone. 80% of the people oppose these projects. Some of these projects, at the end of the day, in 1, 5, 10 years, I could look back and say, hey, this was awesome. But at the time, the pulse of the community, it was only about 1,700 people that voted, so yes, it wasn't a lot, but 80% was opposed to it. That 1,700 that took the time to vote on either side is way more than the 700 people that attended the various meetings 5 years ago and came up with a master park plan, transportation plan. And so when I read articles, I see that all these master plans came out 4 or 5 years ago, and they're almost set in stone, and we should have been there, and too bad. And the 700 people, if that's how many there are, that voted for these seem to trump the 1,700 people that voted for certain projects.
Okay, we appreciate your comments.
Well, the other thing I wanted to say is about the vetting.
Well, we need to give other folks some time.
All this is tied in. In terms of vetting, those projects that were done 4 or 5 years ago, the vetting takes place when each project is individually brought before the city and voted, and you listen to constituents. I get the feeling that those projects are vetted and will occur, and we missed our time having not gone to those meetings. I think you need to just vet them by taking votes or listening more and not consider them done deals.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Right here. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One there. Thank you. I'm Jim Ebersole. I've been a resident of Dunwoody for approximately 34 years and a resident of the Dunwoody or Atlanta area for 45 years. And I remember driving by 285. I remember seeing the sign that said perimeter center to come. Also remember that we had what was called kind of the Ashford-Dunwoody commercial creep that we fought for a long time as it moved its way to what you're now calling the Dunwoody town center of the farmhouse area. We fought all that zoning as hard as we could with DeKalb County to keep that from coming this direction. So I must say that I'm not in favor of this movement toward more commercial into downtown Dunwoody. And I say, as this gentleman said, I don't think anybody's listening. I think a lot of people feel that way. As it relates to that, we said that there was zoning that we had a problem with for many, many years. And that now we've grandfathered in the commercial area that you're saying. We've grandfathered in the multifamily down there. I want to understand how you are even considering having a subdivision in Dunwoody Club Forest or a lot there subdivided into a new subdivision within an existing platted subdivision, and why the city council cannot take a stand on that and defers it to the planning department. Give me an update, please, on that.
Who wants to answer that?
That zoning situation.
I'll let you add to it if you want. For those of you who didn't hear the question, basically we're talking about the piece of property in Dunwoody Club Forest that is right at 1 acre and has 280 feet of street frontage. And somebody has come to the city and wants to tear down the houses on it and put 2 houses on that lot. Legally, R100, which is what that neighborhood is zoned, legally you can fit 2 R100 houses on that piece of property. Now, legally, sir, legally, this is where we are right now. I think City Council needs to discuss how we might want to change that in the future, but I think this particular issue, we need to see how it plays out. I think that when the developer actually brings the plans to the city with all the setbacks that are necessary, he's going to find that he's not able to build what he thinks he can build. We're going to enforce the law to the letter of the law, but I think we're going to find that that piece of property is not going to be able to do what the guy would like it to do. But the reality is, if it can, under the current law, and we go to stop him, we basically end up losing a lawsuit and probably paying for his lawyer. And we don't want that to happen. So right now, we're waiting for him to come back to us. He came to us originally a while back with a plan. And our planning people said, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, and here's the setbacks on each side, and here's where you are. And he walked away realizing he's not going to get 2 4,000 square foot houses with 3-car garages on these 2 lots. I don't know what the solution is going to be or how he's going to come back to us, but I can't predict how this is all going to go, but my impression is he can't get what he wants based on that. But, you know, just let me back up a little bit. We as a city council, we hear this issue and we understand it and we sympathize and we definitely want to figure out a way to fix it. But stopping if he actually can get away with this, stopping it by putting a lawsuit in front of him and doing all those things is a great way for us to spend a lot of money and lose, and he still gets what he wants. So my advice right now is let's wait to see what he comes back with. Let's see if he can make this work. Let's then start discussing how we can make this, you know, the rest of Dunwoody Club Forest happy. Because I think to the bigger issue is not just this piece of property. It's the fact that you know that whole neighborhood is R100, even though you have in most cases 150 to 180 feet of frontage and side entry garages. These are certainly bigger than R100, but the developer, when he built this neighborhood, went with R100. My fear is that somebody comes along and buys 4 houses in a row and can put in 7 R100 houses and just take all those down and do it again. So that's what the city council is more concerned about in my mind, is how do we make sure going forward we keep this from happening? This one we might lose, but how do we make sure that we don't let this happen anymore? And I think that's the bigger issue. Anything you want to add to that?
All right, I want to be respectful of your time. I understand we're a little after 9 right now. Is there a burning question? Here we go. Burning question.
3 points. One, I believe the city council and even the city manager are well-intentioned. The problem comes from things like we did vote for a trail in the park. We didn't vote for a highway. And somehow, mysteriously, it went from a trail to a highway. That's point 1. Point 2, I think if you want to test the roundabout, you should do it at Chamblee, Dunwoody, and Mount Vernon. And then you can test it there. Third point, get rid of smart people to the slogan. It's embarrassing.
Okay, we appreciate everybody's attentiveness and respect of each other. And we again appreciate the high school hosting us, the mayor, and the city manager. Let's give them a round for answering your questions.